Yeah, I'm fired up. The excitement is real.
The Houston Texans select C.J. Stroud, quarterback, Ohio State.
It's time for Inside the Houston Texans.
And I can't wait to get to work, to get to coaching.
With Jake Asman of ESPN Radio.
We just want to make the city of Houston proud.
Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for the most comprehensive insight on your Houston Texans.
More plays we made, so we'll see.
Yo, let's talk some Houston Texans. My guest today is one of my good friends in the business. He covers the team up close. His name is Cole Thompson, and he joins us now. What's going on, Cole? How are you?
Well, you know what, dude? It's a good time to have a relaxation period because it is about ready to get crazy down at NRG Drive with the Texans starting off this upcoming season in Baltimore. And we don't know who are the 5 starting offensive linemen blocking for C.J. Stroud week 1.
Lot to get into here. And look, there's some serious questions I have about whether or not the Texans are putting C.J. Stroud in a spot where he's going to fail early on. He's going to struggle. He's not going to have a lot of success. And we start with the offensive line because Juice Scruggs goes on IR, meaning he's out the first 4 games of the year. Obviously, if you watched Inside the Texans with Aaron Wilson and I, we talked about Kenyon Green being placed on injured reserve. So, Cole, what will the Texans' offensive line look like in week 1 for C.J. Stroud?
Dude, I don't think anybody inside the building right now has an idea. Because if you go back and you listen to Nick Caserio's press conference yesterday, he talked about adding in the additions of Kendrick Green from the Pittsburgh Steelers. He talked about adding in the additions of Josh Jones from the Arizona Cardinals. But he mentioned, don't expect players we just added in to be ready and available for week 1. So now you take out 2 of the more experienced guys that are supposed to fortify the offensive line for the upcoming season, with Juice Scruggs on the IR, with Kendrick, wow, that's going to be tough to go. Kenyon Green done for the end of the year. But you're not going to potentially have 2 of the guys who are stable options to elevate your status on what you really like about where this unit is. This is an offensive line that is the most expensive in the NFL. Laramie Tunsil gets a contract extension. Titus Howard gets a contract extension. You extend as soon as you bring over Shaq Mason. And you invest 2 early draft picks in Kenyon Green and Juice Scruggs. 3 of them potentially are not going to be made available for week 1. Not to mention, you don't know what you have with Kendrick Green, who can play center. He has experience at guard. You also have a guy like Josh Jones, who can play left tackle, play right tackle, play the likes of even interior offensive line. But if they're not ready for the start of the season, you're looking at Jared Patterson. You bring back Michael Dieter, who can be elevated for the practice squad up to the active roster 3 times during the regular season. But are you going to utilize him week 1? What do you look at right now with who are the best starting 5 out there? And you have to start C.J. Stroud. I know what everyone's going to say. Well, let's just look at potentially playing Davis Mills week 1. You learn nothing by getting Davis Mills as your starter for the start of the year. You got to get C.J. Stroud as many reps as possible. Remember back in 2017 when you had Tom Savage trot out against Jacksonville, and then by halftime it was like, no. We're going to throw in Deshaun Watson because that gives us any bit of possibility. So I look at right now, what are the best starting options? If you get quality practice reps from Josh Jones, you got to throw him in there, whether it be at right tackle, whether it be at interior offensive line, whether it be at guard, whether it be at center, whatever it is, you got to find a way to get him in. Same thing with Kendrick Green. You need the best starting 5 up there because M&T Bank Stadium is a rigorous place to play, number 1. And this was the number 1 defense in the NFL last year once Roquan Smith entered the chat in Baltimore. So whatever it is, you have options. I mean, I don't know what exactly they are or what they entail, but you got to figure out what is the best plan available to keep C.J. Stroud upright and really not face the pressure going into this first start in the NFL season.
There's just a lot to unpack there, right? Because obviously this team has spent a lot on their offensive line, either in the draft or in free agency, trade market extensions to guys like Shaq Mason. But right now, Cole, I mean, you have, 2 guaranteed starters on this offensive line, less than 2 weeks to go for week 1, Laramie Tunsil and obviously Shaq Mason. I mean, how concerning is that for maybe the development of C.J. Stroud early on?
Depends on what you mean by development in terms of early on. Because are you going to be able to get Josh Jones back in week 2? Are you going to be able to get Kendrick Green potentially out on the field? What does Jarrett Patterson, the 6th-round pick out of Notre Dame, who has position versatility playing center and guard, not just during his time with the Texans, but also during his final year at Notre Dame? What does he provide for your status? And the other thing that's really important, what happens with Titus Howard? Because you hear right now that Titus is working his way back. He's now he's out of the cast. He's inside the locker room. He's back at practice in limited role. But what does this mean for week 2? Week 1 is going to be a cluster mess, no matter how you want to put it. It's a new quarterback. It's a new offensive system. It's a bunch of different players who are trying to build a cohesive balance together. It's week 2 that you're really focusing in on, because that's Indianapolis. That's a division game. That's a team that's going through its own trials and tribulations with the Jonathan Taylor experience, with a new quarterback in Anthony Richardson, brand new offensive play caller in Shane Steichen. What do you want to go into week 2? Because to me, that's really where you separate yourself from being in that conversation of maybe you can actually see what Stroud is able to produce. I want to be able to see what that offensive line looks like. But right now, you got questions everywhere. I mean, you really do. Because if Josh Jones has to play inside at guard, what does that mean for George Fant? Is he playing your right tackle spot? What does it mean for Larry Tunsil? I mean, what does it mean for Titus Howard? I mean, there was a question asked yesterday. Do you think Titus Howard can shift back into guard? Dude, we all saw what happened that year. I mean, you don't want that to ever occur again. You want him staying as far away possible from the interior. You need him on the exterior blocking. So I don't really know what you're looking at right now, because you got to get stabilization, number one, up front, but you also have to get continuity. The one factor that really hurts this Texans team right now, the one thing that really is irking, you had an entire offseason of the starting 5 working together, and then you lose Titus Howard for a little bit, so you get George Fant playing on the right side. But then you now have questions without your first team center, because, lost Scott Questenberry the first week of the season. Then you lose Juice Scruggs. So they don't have a lot of cohesion up front. How does that affect C.J. Stroud going into week 2, then week 3, then week 4? And also, how long is Juice Scruggs out on the IR? Because if he was working with the ones, if you can get him back, maybe that's a positive, at least by midseason. But you got to figure something out.
There's just a lot of unknown right now. So with that being said, I mean, you've watched C.J. Stroud up close being at camp every day. He clearly got better as the summer went on. And I think it's really encouraging that, even though we all kind of felt like no matter what, he was going to be named the week 1 starter, he was their best quarterback. Like, he truly did earn the job. So I think that's a positive for Stroud. Your thoughts now on kind of the expectations for year 1 of CJ as this thing gets going for real in just 10 days from right now?
Consistency, consistency, consistency. Everyone is going to try and say, well, wins matter in your first year. No, they don't. And also, wins are the most overrated quarterback stat of all time, just because of you don't pick up the versatility and you get the likes of all of the victories at the end of the year. I want to see how you build from week 1 to week 17. That's the main thing. You already see that one thing that really stands out about a guy like Stroud is his completion and his ability to put the ball in the right place. Like, go back and watch that throw against the New Orleans Saints with Nico Collins. A defender is not going to make a play on that. So that's only where Collins can come up with the catch. Let's see that continue. How does the relationship build with guys like Tank Dell, with John Mechie, with Xavier Hutchinson, with Noah Brown, with Robert Woods? Because you know that the completion percentage is always going to be there. That was one of his biggest strengths when he was at Ohio State. Like, everyone wants to focus in on, he had Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson and Eme Akeba and Julian Fleming and the superstar Marvin Harrison Jr. He still had to get the ball in the right place for them to do damage after the catch. And that's an area where you've seen time and time and time again in practice, in games. Ball placement is phenomenal coming out of his hands. But now you have to build on that rapport and that relationship. How do you work on third down with Dalton Schultz? What happens when you're under duress and you're in facing man coverage and everyone is blanketed down the field? What happens when you have the opportunity to take that deep shot? Are you building that rapport to know, I'm throwing it right here, the defensive back is going to be lost in translation? Can you come up with that catch? I want to see progression every single week. I want to see him be able to show that he's confident, he's poised, he has the demeanor, the swagger, and the mentality to be a legitimate starter in the NFL, because that's what Houston needs right now. They don't need the wins. They need to have stability at the most important position going forward. Because you know this, Jake. Look at the New York Jets. Last season, top 5 defense, elite weaponry, great rushing attack, mixed offensive line. We can be honest about that one. But still, the only reason why they didn't find their way into the postseason picture was because they had an Uber Eats driver at quarterback every single Sunday. So now you add an Aaron Rodgers. The level of expectation when it comes to the quarterback play in this conference, not the division, the conference. Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, Trevor Lawrence. You got Mac Jones potentially slinging it out with big game Bill Belichick and Bill O'Brien. You have Kenny Pickett looking like he's becoming something special. You need to have the quarterback position figured out if you want any opportunity to be successful moving forward. So I don't really care about wins. I care about continuity, chemistry, and consistency from C.J. Stroud in year one.
Ultimately, this year, to me, is not going to necessarily be judged on wins or losses. You're right. But Cole, listening to Nick Caserio the other day, and they asked him, hey, are you guys going to be a better team? And Nick Caserio's answer didn't exactly inspire the fan base. It was like, yeah, that's the hope. I mean, Nick Caserio now is entering his third year at the helm. He is on his third coach. Obviously, the expectation level should be higher, and the Texans themselves don't have their own first-round pick because they traded it to go and get Will Anderson. So what are the overall expectations for the team? Like, to me, they got to win more than 3 games. Like, that's not going to cut it. I know their win total at most sports books is around 6.5. Would you go over or under, or is 6.5 right? Are they going to win around 6 games?
I don't know. I mean, 6.5 feels like right if you have everything going for you. Like you have a healthy offensive line. You see the relationship build with Tank Dell and John Mechie and Nico Collins. You see the third down conversions really take flight with a guy in Dalton Schultz, who I ultimately think is going to lead this team in receptions, targets, receiving yards, and maybe even touchdowns. Just because you want that security blanket for a young quarterback to thrive and prosper. Like that's exactly what made Dak Prescott a viable option when he was coming out. Jason Witten, just a very surefire-handed tight end that can move the sticks and keep drives alive. That's what you need to see. But you don't have that right now. You don't have a legitimate number one receiver. Like Nico Collins on paper probably is your go-to guy, but maybe Tank Dell ends up being that player. Maybe it ends up being Xavier Hutchinson. Maybe John Mechie builds that rapport and he becomes your go-to, but you don't have that going into week 1. You don't have stability on the offensive line because you don't know who's playing where in the starting 5. And the defense can only do so much. Like as good as teams are defensively, you still have to put up the points because if they can get as many stops as possible, get the ball back to the offense, force 3 and outs like no one's business. But if you go 3 and out in the same process, it's just a slow burn to the finish line of mediocrity. And you're not wrong. Nick Caserio faces a lot of pressure this year. He has to face a lot of pressure this year because you also start looking at the players that he recently released. These are guys who you view as supposed to be standouts for your team. You drafted them. You evaluated them. You said that these were players that you thought were going to be a part of the long-term process. And you no longer have Garrett Wallow. You no longer have Thomas Booker. You barely know what you get in Brevin Jordan and Tegan Quintoriano at backup tight end. You don't know what you have in Brandon Hill. You don't know what you have in all of these other guys that you recently released. So now you have got to see the numbers start to improve. And the biggest thing is that if you end up losing your first round pick, which you did because you traded for Will Anderson, I agree with the move. I do. Because if I know that right now, when you look at what Will Anderson can be for the long term, it might be worth the investment. But you have to win to hurt Arizona's chances of getting a premier player. That's the big ticket here because you're relying on Cleveland to sucking and being a bad organization so you can get a higher draft pick. You, at the same token, have to do everything possible to trot out and get as many wins because if you don't, you're watching a team go back-to-back or first and third, and they get a premier quarterback, they get a premier pass rusher, they get an elite wide receiver, positions that you need to target for 2024. I think if I were to be a betting man right now, I would say 5 wins is probably where I'd put this team at. And that's because there's just too many questions. And that's also expecting Will Anderson is an absolute stud from the jump. C.J. Stroud is wheeling and dealing from the get-go. You're seeing this team just come together and put up great rapport and great chemistry and great culture. And I don't even know if that's even plausible when you don't know who are half the starters going into week 1.
I mean, ultimately, Nick Caserio is going to start to truly be evaluated, I think, after this year because they say it takes at least 3 years to grade a GM. And, here we are looking at Nick Caserio going into a huge third year. And it's been unconventional because he took over and had to trade Deshaun Watson and had to wait a year to do it because of the legal situation. But you kind of go through the job he has done overall. I mean, how would you grade Nick Caserio? I saw some Texans fans talking about this on Twitter. I would say there's been some good, there's been some bad. It's kind of meh right now. That's why this year is so big, and that's why I didn't love what I heard yesterday from the GM who traded away their own first-round pick. Like, you're saying you're going to be a better team. when you make that kind of move, you better be a better team and step up and certainly win more than just 3 games like what they've won the last couple of years.
Well, let me ask you, what would you grade it?
I would say it's been probably about a C+.
I would say it's incomplete. Is that fair? I mean, like it shouldn't be, because if you know that right now, based off all of the moves you made, you should.
It comes down to Stroud. Like, look, ultimately, if he hits on the quarterback, you're going to feel a lot better about his time. And I think they got it right with D'Amico, but that doesn't excuse David Culley because you hired that guy, or hiring Lovey because Cal stepped in last second, wouldn't let you hire Josh McCown. So, you know, I'm not in love with Casario's picks. He takes Derek Stingley Jr. instead of Sauce Gardner. He takes Kenyon Green, who might already be a bust, instead of Zion Johnson, who's on the rookie team, or Tyler Linderbaum, or Kyle Hamilton, or Jordan Davis. I mean, there's been some good picks. Dameon Pierce, Jalen Petrie, some good picks. But, you know, the free agent signings have left a lot to be desired. The coaching hires have been bad to this point. We'll find out with D'Amico. So it hasn't been all bad, but I'm also not sitting here feeling great about Caserio. My hope is D'Amico's now basically the guy calling the shots at the end of the day.
But, Jake, I will say one thing real fast. No one was going to be successful in that zone coverage cover 2 defense underneath a guy in Lovie Smith. Like, you could say Sauce Gardner, who came from a man coverage base when he was playing in Cincinnati, gets drafted number 3 overall. He still is going to stink.
Well, I think Stingley's a good player, Cole. Right. That's not my knock on Stingley, but you know, what was the knock on Derek Stingley coming out of LSU? He played 10 games over his last 2 years, and last year he got hurt as a rookie, so that's part of the conversation.
Because the injury concern, and that's another thing. And then you see the numbers of 4.3, 940, and he looks versatile and fluid coming out of his breaks at LSU's pro day. And you infatually fall in love with the dude, where at least you know the production of Sauce Gardner during his 4-year tenure. The guy didn't allow a touchdown in coverage. I mean, we talked about this in the draft show in 2021, and everyone lost their minds when I said Sauce Gardner was the most complete player in this year's draft, because he was. And then last year, he allows 1 touchdown in coverage, but he also went to a team that really fit his style of play. And I'm not saying that won't happen with a guy in Derek Stingley, because guess who is running the show? A Robert Saleh disciple, who I think is going to get the best play out of Stingley in coverage. You also have the likes of a really good number 2 cornerback locked in with Steven Nelson. You bring over versatility in Jimmy Ward. You have versatility in Jalen Petrie. You mentioned that you do get a really good running back in Dameon Pierce. I like some of the free agent moves. Denzel Perriman's going to be a really good thumper linebacker and allow a guy such as Christian Harris to play in space. I like that you have the veteranship of Jerry Hughes. I like what you did to fortify the defensive line with Sheldon Rankins and Hassan Ridgeway, players who know the style of defense. But I say it's incomplete because the first 2 years really were just eating the salary cap of bad moves made by the previous regime. I mean, who's going out there and paying $50 million for Whitney Merciless? Who's going out there and giving a lucrative contract to Eric Murray? Who's making these type of moves that really hurt your organization? And don't even get started on what we saw with the whole DeAndre Hopkins fiasco, because that's a whole nother conversation with Bill O'Brien that has led to him being known as basic public enemy number 1 inside the building. But it's incomplete because if this is really the first year where everything can kind of culminate together. Caserio was able to go out and spend money, get a Dalton Schultz, get a Devin Singletary to take pressure off of a guy in Dameon Pierce. Go get a wide receiver such as Robert Woods. Maybe overpaid for him, but you needed that veteran presence inside the locker room. You also went and you drafted a guy in C.J. Stroud, your actual franchise quarterback, the guy that you have high hopes, invested a first-round pick in. But to me, the Will Anderson one is bigger because Will Anderson, if he comes out swinging and he is just as big as an impactful force on the defensive side, and he puts up great numbers and excellent rapport and shows why he is legitimately a superstar pass rusher in the making, that might be enough to get you a few more wins here and there if CJ Stroud builds that relationship on offense to where, guess what? Now the Cardinals are picking 8th. Now the Cardinals are picking 9th. And maybe when you look at the Browns, they could be picking 12th. So at that point, that to me is just as big as a deal because you don't own that first round pick. And so if you end up being a terrible organization, everyone's going to go back and say, well, why didn't you just wait a year to go get your quarterback? Or why didn't you just wait a year to go get a pass rusher? Why didn't you just wait a year to go land a superstar wide receiver that could have been a difference maker from the jump into Marvin Harrison or an Xavier Worthy or a Roma Dunze, any one of those guys? So this is an incomplete for me because of every year before this has kind of just been trotting along, waiting to get to this point. But now you have your coach. Now you have your first round quarterback. Now you have your enforcer and your J.J. Watt clone on the defensive line. You were able to spend money. This is the year where I actually start to judge Nick Caserio. If I had to give a grade right now, I'd give it a C- because, again, you did hire David Culley. You did hire Lovie Smith. You did end up drafting these players and giving up significant capital to get several of these guys. But I still think it's incomplete because up to this point, you literally were just sitting along trying to get to where you finally could make these moves to really jumpstart the actual rebuild.
It's definitely incomplete to this point, but there are some warning signs that I'd be concerned with. That being said, it comes down to the quarterback, right? If C.J. Stroud's really good, that kind of masks a lot of the issues here. Because let's be fair to Caserio, he inherited this team thinking he was going to have Deshaun Watson as his quarterback and then had to wait a year to trade the guy because he was an alleged sexual deviant. So let's not forget about that, you know?
Yeah. Listen, $230 million just to be able to have 22 claims against you. I mean, imagine what you would be able to do if we got paid that.
Your thoughts on the 53-man roster, Cole? Obviously, you were covering it all day yesterday, kind of the moves trickling in, practice squad, all that. Anything really take you aback when you see the initial 53?
I'll go with two. We'll start off with the lesser one, Jacob Martin. All throughout the preseason, we heard that Jacob Martin was improving. He was starting to show why he was going to be a difference maker. He was working with the ones at times, and then he gets waived. The reasoning behind that is you better have an opportunity to either get like a Dylan Horton, who was a 4th-round pick, and another Nick Caserio selection of more reps and you didn't want to take away from his development, or you just honestly don't know what you're doing with the defensive front because of what's the reason that you're keeping other players around when you know that the production has been efficient with a guy in Jacob Martin in the front 7. And then the Desmond King one. Desmond was a starter for 2 years on this team. Desmond signed a 2-year extension to come back to the organization last offseason. He was a guy who had versatility to play on the outside, play on the inside, and you need cornerback depth. And I like Kadar Hallman. I thought he made a lot of good plays. I thought also a guy like Cam Dantzler, who was released, made some great plays. He ended the preseason with an interception. But when you have that versatility and the veteranship and punt return experience, where now you're trusting either Tank Dell or someone else to go ahead and take over that role, it just feels like a souring look. And now I talked to some people around the building and they said it wasn't unexpected, but at the same time, this was somebody who was regarded as a leader in the locker room. This was somebody who had multiple years of playing experience, and it was somebody who could have fortified your secondary, which is going to be a major point to success for, I think, this organization this year. I thought that was the biggest wild card. Michael Dieter getting released was kind of weird because he was working at the starting role against the New Orleans Saints, and he already knew kind of the offense being there for a couple weeks. But you bring him back on the practice squad, so that's kind of good. Those are really the main ones that I thought I kind of noticed. So you got a lot of pressure on Tavierre Thomas going into year 3 with this organization.
I mean, it's just a little bit of a surprise, but not to me something that's truly going to move the needle.
Which one? The Desmond King one?
Desmond King, yeah. Like, you know, a little bit of a surprise, but I'm not losing sleep over him not being on the team.
I'm not losing sleep over him not being on the team, but now I'm saying, okay, what happens if we don't have Tavierre Thomas out there? Because Tavierre is also a really good special teamers. That's easier to replace than a nickel defender. What are you doing? Trusting Graylin Arnold? You're moving Shaq Griffin inside, who only played on the outside throughout the entire preseason? Like, how do you figure out that position going into the year? And then yesterday you had the waiver claims. You didn't add in a defensive back who could actually play that role. You have another defensive back who's a safety that is kind of a bigger guy, and Michael Broker, who is an offensive lineman, who surprisingly had multiple waiver claims on him as a 7th-round pick. But I want to know what the depth is at that position. Until I know who's actually backing up Tavierre Thomas, it is a glaring spot for me.
All right. Let's kind of get it back to what we started with here, talking about Stroud being put in a tough spot with the state of the offensive line. Your prediction, left to right, week 1 against the Ravens, the Texans' offensive line is what?
Left to right, Laramie Tunsil, guaranteed left tackle. No problem there. Left guard, I'm going to go with the wild card. I'm going to say Josh Jones does get the start. I think that even though you heard yesterday that Nick Caserio was telling about how these guys aren't going to be maybe ready to go week 1, you hear the way D'Amico Ryans talks about him, his ability to win at the point of attack, his great hand usage, his violent ability to win upfield against interior and exterior defensive linemen. I think that you need to get the most experienced player opposite of Laramie Tunsil, so that's the guy who I think comes in there. I think right now I'm going to go Jared Patterson at center. I don't know why I feel that way, but he's basically the only guy that has significant reps that seen play at the field at the point. So I'm going to give him the nod. Shaq Mason's going in at right guard. And I will say right now, George Fant, not Titus Howard. I think Titus is going to wait until week 2. But I do think he will be out there for the home opener against Indianapolis. He'll be there for week 2. He just won't be there week 1. So George Fant's going on the right side.
Chevini writes in, if you have a comment or question for Cole or I to address, we'll do that here at the end. By trading away their 2024 first, the Texans are leaving themselves very little margin for error. Look, they think they're going to be better by making that move. That's why I didn't love Casario's answer yesterday, but go out there and win some games, and it's all not going to matter at the end of the day.
Here's the way I look at it. If you get 10.5 sacks, 15.5 tackles for losses, 35 pressures, and a defensive rookie of the year in Will Anderson, worth the investment?
Yeah, I mean, if he's that might be rookie of the year type of thing.
That's what I'm saying. He's defensive rookie of the year. You get that. You weren't getting him at pick number 12. He was never going to fall to you. So you knew you had to move up. But you also knew you need a quarterback. So I don't hate the move and the aggressiveness to go get your guy, but he has got to be able to produce. And I'll be real, he's going to produce. The way he's been playing in practice, the way that his motor is relentless, he doesn't stop, great fluidity when he bends, his ability to work upfield, and his ability to go ahead and work second-tier moves where hand usage, he swats and swims, works back inside. He's going to be an enforcer. But I got to be able to see what his production is because it's maybe worth the selection, even if you were to go, I don't know, 5-12, 6-11. It's worth the production if he ends up being defensive rookie of the year.
He's your pick for defensive rookie of the year?
Yeah, it's my pick right now. Offensive rookie of the year is a wild card. I don't know if it will be CJ just because of I do worry about the weaponry. But
I always go with running backs for that. It seems like they're more likely to win that award. Like I would take Bijan and feel pretty good about it with the Falcons.
That's me. I mean, but Bijan also is just a dude who can be utilized in so many ways. Like I heard somebody bring up on a Reddit thread, oh, he's going to lead the NFL in rushing yards. He'll win the rushing title. No, he won't because if you have Ty Algier and they know how to utilize running backs in Arthur Smith's system. But I think that his versatility is going to make him a 1,300-yard player. He's going to get 10-plus touchdowns. He, in my opinion, is running away with the award.
Yeah, 100%. And ultimately, if C.J. Stroud is in that conversation, you'd sign up for that, even if he doesn't win the award. I mean, most rookie quarterbacks tend to struggle. So I said this on the radio show. I've said this, here on YouTube now. Like, it's going to be okay if C.J. Stroud has some bad games. Like, it's going to happen. Like that is what happens with a rookie quarterback. Look how much better he got from that debacle in the first preseason start to where he was against the Saints last week, where he looked really good. Like, people got to be a little patient.
Here, let me ask you. He throws for 65% of his passes. He finishes with a passer rating around 97. He throws for 3,300 yards. Let's go 25 touchdowns or 24 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. That's a great number for a rookie quarterback.
He might win rookie of the year with those numbers. Those are great numbers for a rookie quarterback.
Say he goes like 60% completion percentage and like a 91 passer rating, and he finishes with 20 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. At least you're showing improvement and you're seeing the rapport and the chemistry build. Like, that's the whole thing.
Correct. He doesn't have a great receivers, and the offensive line now is major questions. You tell me C.J. Stroud's 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. If you're a Texan fan, you'd be nuts not to sign for that.
If you're 1.5-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio, you take that because of what you have right now. Like,
100%.
To me, the entire process is seeing how he improves from that first preseason game under duress, throwing into double coverage, to now just wheeling and dealing, threading the needle, making sure every pass is on point, building that relationship with the receivers. I get that. I don't really care what the record is. I care more about his rapport and his chemistry and continuity going from year 1 to year 2. That's the thing that needs to stand out when it comes to CJ Stroud.
Fantasy question from Cartman at the buzzer here. Would you draft Nico Collins in a late round pick?
What's late round? Like the very last pick? Sure, why not? You're going to be on the waiver wire the next week anyway, so might as well just take him.
And there you have it. He's Cole Thompson. Cole, where can people follow you?
You can follow me now on YouTube. We are live over there at Cole Thompson 1675. I'm going to work on getting that name changed very soon.
You need a profile picture on the YouTube here. Have you done that?
I have one.
All right, you got that.
It's of me. You can also listen to me every single day, Monday.
You muted yourself, Cole. Nice job.
You can follow me every single day on YouTube you can follow me every single day at Mr. Cole Thompson on Twitter, and you can catch me live Monday through Friday, 2 a.m. to 5 a.m. Central Time. You can always rewatch the show on YouTube if you want to as well.
There you go. That's why we're doing this video. Cole's live on YouTube right now, so subscribe to him, Texans fan. You guys have followed me when I was on ESPN Radio for all those years. now you have a chance to follow Cole. He'll be giving you daily content on his channel as well. He's Cole. I'm Jake. Thanks for watching, Texans fans. Be on the lookout for another Inside the Texans episode with Aaron Wilson. If you missed yesterday's, that's up on my channel. We broke down the 53-man roster. Aaron had some good insight in the Kenyon Green situation and much more, so check that out if you didn't get a chance to watch it live yesterday. He's Cole. I'm Jake. Have a good Thursday, everybody. We're another day closer. The Texans and the Ravens to kick off the NFL season.